Well, I know you've produced a lot of amazing artists, and we could spend a long time talking about them, but if it's all right with you, I'd rather showcase your skills as a producer by focusing on your own solo projects.
Sure.
The first one I want to talk about is an album you put out under the alias Rake and the Surf Tones in the late 90s. It's a really fun listening experience called Surfers Drive Woodies that pays tribute to the surf sounds of the Ventures and the Beach Boys and Dick Dale. Before we talk about that album, I want to play a couple of tracks from it. Most of it's instrumental, so the first one is more representative of the overall sound of the album. If the melody sounds familiar, it should. It's been around a while. It's Chopin's Minute Waltz, reimagined in the surf style and renamed Minute Wave. It's a joyous piece of music making I know everyone's going to enjoy, and if, like me, you ever had to play the Minute Waltz for piano lessons, it will definitely have you smiling and wishing you could have played it this way instead. Then right after that, we're going to hear the somewhat misleading surf ballad Malibu Pier. So take it away, Rake and the Surf Tones.
There's a secret world of wonder I escape to when the answers to life's problems seem unclear. There's a never, never land where the ocean meets the sand. Leave your troubles at Malibu Pier. When the noises of the city overwhelm you, let the blue Pacific whisper in your ear. When the valley starts to shake, that's when big ones start to break. Flee the rubble for Malibu Pier. Though the waves at Hermosa Beach are thrilling, and the girls at Santa Monica so tan, when the waste from Bologna Creek starts spilling, there's just one plan. Go north, young man, and you'll find an ocean paradise for dreamers. For the young and young at heart, it's waiting here. You might find your summer queen, might run into Ben Vereen. It could happen at Malibu Pier. It could happen at Malibu
Well, I love how the early verses of that song set up a typical "come join us at the beach" kind of vibe. Then as the song progresses, it starts bringing up things like earthquakes, toxic waste, and what I initially thought was a random celebrity sighting, but I've since learned that the line, "you might find your summer queen, might run into Ben Vereen," is not random at all. What's the story there?
Hey, I didn't write the lyrics, okay?
Okay.
Jim Cox wrote that song, and Jim Cox is a keyboard player extraordinaire. Jim Cox can play any style incredibly well, like he owns it. He is an absolute masterful keyboard player, organ player, whatever. If it's got keys on it, he can play it. And here's how this album came about. And Jim wrote that song, of course, in the Beach Boys tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And that line is in there. Poor David. Ben Vereen basically had an aneurysm and was walking down Malibu. He was at his manager's house first, fell asleep, didn't want to go to the hospital, woke up, and then, aimlessly was walking down Highway 1, and David just happened to be coming home. David saved his life by running into him, because the aneurysm would have killed him eventually, quickly.
Right.
So with hitting Ben Vereen, got him to the hospital, they discovered the aneurysm, and honest to God, that saved his life. Well, when Jim came in with a lyric, I'm going, oh, God, I don't know, man. But I told everybody they can write songs and bring them in, and, I'm not here to edit their stuff,
Well, Malibu is known for having celebrities around. So when you first hear the song, it just seems like this innocent, cute little joke. Oh, I might run into Ben Vereen. But then when you know that David Foster literally ran into him, it's more of like a sort of a cruel, sick joke.
Well, it was, look, like I say, man, talk to Jim Cox.
Okay, well,
I got nothing to do with this. And when Joseph Williams, one of the singers, a total humor king, that guy's one funny guy, when he found the line in the song, he counted backwards to make sure that in the order of the three singers, he was going to be the one to sing the line. Anyway, here's what happened. I was on tour in 1994 with my all-star band, so to speak, in Japan and parts of Europe. And while in Japan, the earthquake went down in L.A., and my street got hit bad. My house looked like it was destroyed when I finally got back to L.A. to see it. Studio, you wouldn't have believed it. It was a time to rebuild everything. Basically, the frame stayed, but everything had to go. It was a 2-year gig. Anyway, when finally the studio was ready to go, and I was living here again, I needed to do a test project. So I'm thinking, what can I do here that would be fun, get the guys to come over and play, and we'll just do it, and quickly. And I thought a surf record would be great. And I was in contact with David Hungate a lot, as all over the years. And I said, hey, Hungus, do you want to do this? And he said, I'd fly out there to do it. I go, beautiful, man, okay. I started writing tunes. I told everybody to bring in all the tunes they wanted. And these tunes are 2 takes, maybe. Rehearsal and record. We recorded 18 tracks with a lot of overdubs in 2 nights.
Yeah.
So we just blazed for this. And I said the whole key to this, guys, is keep in mind that we're going to play like we're teenagers. Mm-hmm. Don't try to play too good. Let's really relive the what we were then. And that's how we kept it light like that. And by the way, on the Minute Wave song, Dean says, "How's your reading?" I go, "Let's see. I haven't been doing record dates in 30 years. Not too good."
And you got to read Chopin.
Right. And I go, hey, Dean, look, if you don't want to play it, I don't blame you, and I'll play it later. I'll learn it and play it. Nah, I got it, he says. Well, he read the thing down. Mm-hmm. Dean's a great reader.
Yeah, we're talking about Dean Parks again.
Oh, yeah, man.
Well, let me ask you, all the instruments on the album sound very authentic. Did you guys record it with vintage gear?
I spent 6 months. I knew this was going to go down a long time before it did, actually got recorded. I spent 6 months looking for a Showman 15 with the oxblood grill cloth and found one.
Yeah.
So Dean used a twin reverb and a Gretsch guitar. His wasn't as... and by the way, I have an old 1964 Fender Tank reverb that I've owned since then.
Yeah.
So I used that with the Showman. And John Ferraro brought over an old set of drums that maybe he had since the Surf era.
Mm-hmm.
Cox had a B3 and a Wurlitzer brought in.
Yeah, the keyboards sound perfect.
And the bass that Hungate played, he didn't drag one out with him. I have a 62 Precision, Fender Precision, and he played that.
Yeah.
I said, hey, man, the strings haven't been changed in this bass since, I don't know, 1970. He says, I'll change them. So I got strings. He picks up the bass and says, we don't need to change these strings. And I go, okay. And he ran through my basement top and a bottom with two 15 JBLs in it.
Yeah.
Two 15-inch JBLs.
Well, we're talking about that attention to detail that makes a difference in what you hear, and I heard it. I mean, you could trick someone into thinking that these songs were recorded in, 1963 or something. Now, most of the tracks are instrumentals along the lines of the Ventures and the Safaris, but, in addition to Malibu Pier, there are some other notable vocal songs like October in Oxnard.
David Hungate wrote that.
Well, back in 1956, Julie London put out an album called Calendar Girl, and every song had a different month in the title. It's a shame she couldn't have used that one for October. That would have been cool. You've also got one I really like called The Rake Mystery, which is more of a spoken word storyteller kind of thing.
Joseph Williams. I said, Joe, I'm going to ask a bunch of young surfer guys what the current words are, and then just make up a rap.
It's awesome. That's cool.
Oh, it's just, listen, man, and all the liner notes, everything, nothing is to be taken seriously. And on the song Surfer's Toe Jam that has 26 solos.
Yeah, it's a long one.
Okay, a bunch of them were done here, and then I sent the tapes to Hungate in Nashville, and Hungus had a bunch of guys play solos there. But the night that we did most of the solos, I had the Showman set up and the reverb, and I said, now listen, you guys, there's two rules. Number one, tuning is optional. Number two, if you play too good, you get one more pass. If you play too good, you're wiped. Erased. Next solo.
Yeah, that's fine.
Nobody needed to play more than one take, let me tell you. And the hardest thing to do in doing the tracking tape was to wait till the last chord had rung out and not laugh.
Right. Well, there's an underlying spirit of humor throughout the whole. Clearly sounds like a bunch of guys having fun, but it's really hard if you're a player of a certain caliber to sort of. It's like if you're an actor of a certain caliber to sort of go beneath your abilities, even if it's something you have, nostalgia for that you did earlier as you were learning the instrument. I mean, it would seem to me to be kind of difficult.
Not if you get the mindset right. See, there's times when I totally messed the time up. Mm-hmm. in a lick and a solo. I played like I didn't really quite know what to do. I remember what all the scales were, or what all the licks were from the surf area. It's like I remembered clear as day, so it wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
Wasn't a problem for anybody.
Nice.
You'd think it may be, it wasn't. Hey, look, as studio guys, too, we're supposed to be adaptable.
That's true, yeah.
I want the Chuck Berry lick. I want to like Chuck Berry. No problem.
No, that's a good point, yeah.
Whatever. Also,
we should mention along the same lines as Minute Wave, there's a track called Bach Goes Surfing, which Johann Sebastian gets a similar treatment.
Both Jim and I didn't know we were each bringing in a classical piece that was left field.
Yeah.
And if Bach would have been into surf music, the bridge that I had written, he would approve of.
I'm sure that's true.
It would be true, And I don't know, I couldn't help myself with that. I had to do it, And the same with the Minute Waltz. And then, when each of these tunes came up, both of us looked at the other guy and go, a classical piece. You got to love it, right?
Well, they both work. They
both work.
And there's just some great titles like Run, Don't Walk.
I did everything I could to rip stuff sideways. And look, but I mean, there was no plagiarism per se.
No.
But the whole thing is supposed to be humorous. From the liner notes through the music, but at the same time, a realist can listen to it and go, it's real.
Before we talk about the next album, I want to talk about your dad, Joe Graydon, for a minute. In the early days of television, he had his own show, so we're going to hear in a minute in the early days of Jay Graydon, you appeared on that show. I mean, the very early days. You were 2 years old. Was he primarily a vocalist?
My dad was in the FBI to get out of the being in the Army in Washington, where he's from, and or maybe it was in New York at the time. He sang in the Hit Parade, which was one of the first national TV shows in the 40s. And, you know, he was singing a big hit on a song called Again. In those days, the band leader was the artist and the singer was just paid, you know, for hire. Huge song, Again, Gordon Jenkins Band. And then he came to L.A. and tried to make it out here, and he had a bunch of local TV shows. Never had another hit record. Had local TV shows and radio shows, and, you know, unfortunately never really made it past the local stuff. But that was a 2-hour show in 1951 on my second birthday. I'm on the show with him singing tunes and talking for 2 hours.
Now, when he was at the FBI, I mean, did he have personal dealings with J. Edgar Hoover?
He worked in Hoover's office for Hoover. And Hoover told my dad, I saw you on the Hit Parade last night. No FBI agent of mine is going to be singing on TV. And my dad said, respectively, Mr. Hoover, my tenure will be up in 2 weeks. And I will be moving to Los Angeles to pursue a career as a singer or something like that.
Not many people have the nerve to say no to that guy. You know, I haven't seen that Leonardo DiCaprio movie that came out recently about J. Edgar Hoover, but
I want to see it.
I will say that if that scene with him and your dad had been in the movie, it would have been the best scene in the movie.
Well, it wasn't like my dad was putting down Hoover on any level.
No. It was just such an odd thing. You wouldn't think Hoover would have that conversation with one of his agents. Hey, man, I know you got a song on the charts and or whatever. I saw you on TV. Don't do that. And then a guy saying, well, you know what? You know, F you, Hoover. I'm doing it. You know,
he was a control freak, man. Of course.
It just seems
right. And my dad said, but what are you going to do? Fire me now? I got 2 weeks to go. You can't. I mean, he was being very polite about it. My dad was very polite about it.
Yeah, and if he's gone in 2 weeks, Hoover shouldn't care. It's just
right, exactly.
That's the one guy in the country I don't think I'd say, what can you do about it, to, is Hoover, because he's the type of guy who would do some stuff.
He lucked into a gig that he was untouchable and was still in an era where he could get away with murder.
Yeah.
He's the last guy to ever have a job like that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's talk about your album, Bebop. You know, if you were channeling Dick Dale on the Surf album, you're channeling Joe Pass on this one. I'm going to play one of my favorite tracks from the album, but first we're going to hear the clip that you used to open it from your dad's TV show. It's recorded in 1951, when you were apparently already a television veteran at the age of 2, since he starts out by mentioning last time you were here. You can just tell from his speaking voice, he almost sounds like Bing. You know, he has that classic voice of that era. And I think it's funny how he talks to you like you're an adult, and you actually pretty much have an adult answer to his questions.
Sterling Ball of Ernie Ball Guitars. Sterling owns and runs the company now. Mm-hmm. Sterling Ball used to call my dad Bing all the time. My dad didn't mind.
Last time you were down here, we had a little bit of musical interrogation. What I want to know now is, have your feelings changed on the subject, or you stick to your other theories? What kind of music do you like?
Bebop.
Bebop. Well, you're sticking to that, huh? I think it's a wise choice. It's definitely on the up and coming side.
Well, that track was called Bebop. And before we talk about the other tracks on the album or run down the personnel, let's backtrack to that clip of you on your dad's show. So how does a 2-year-old even know what bebop is, let alone become a fan of it?
Well, obviously my dad was hip enough to hip me to different kinds of music early on.
Mm-hmm.
And odd that I liked jazz then. I mean, well, maybe not.
It was prophetic. Listen to the song you just played
and
wrote.
You know, I'm a frustrated bebopper. You know, I'm like jazz 101. I knew that my strength was in pop, R&B, you know, musical pop, other stuff. I knew my strength was there. I knew I'd never be a great jazz player. I didn't want to sit around and practice all the time. I wanted to go out and work and make a living. And as a studio guy, I mean, I wanted to be the studio guy. If you're mainly a jazzer and you try to play rock, it sounds like it.
But, you know, your playing throughout that album sounds very confident and relaxed, which is, you know, the goal. It's a challenging music form, and to me, you don't sound like a poser. Like you know what you're doing.
I do, but I'm playing licks that are like, you know, jazz, basic jazz 101.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? I mean, you know, I sound like Joe Pass if he was asleep.
Well, luckily you had a lot of support. Let's talk about some of the other players on the album. Obviously, you did the guitar parts. Who was the drummer?
Dave Weckl.
He's pretty decent.
You know, I asked him, first of all, I got to tell you how this album came about. Once again, a test was needed. I'm a technical kind of guy, and I've been hired a bunch of times as a consultant and a beta tester. And this was for the Alesis ADAT. I can't remember the name of the machine. It was the third ADAT in the series, and it was a pro machine. And so we needed to run this. We needed to do something with real musicians and to really check the audio for, you know, how good the bandwidth is and, you know, so forth. So I asked Alesis, I said, look, give these guys an ADAT, each, you know, and I'm sure they'll want to do the gig. And they go, fine. So I knew guys that wanted ADATs that already used ADATs. So that's who the players I called were, that would be interesting. Weckl, I knew was an ADAT guy. I actually didn't know if Dave Carpenter was or not, but I asked Weckl, I said, who do you want to play bass? And he says, Dave Carpenter. And I said, done. And Carp, you know, to not confuse the two, Dave Carpenter's nickname was Carp. Poor Dave Carpenter passed away a while back, man.
That's sad.
What a great musician and what a great guy. In any case, Bill Cantos, a real good friend of mine who I've been writing with for the years. Bill's one of those guys that can play anything, too. I mean, anything.
Mm-hmm.
And Brandon Fields, whoa. I mean, the sax player of sax players. He's as good as it gets, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew Brandon was into ADAT, so it made perfect sense. You know, I called Weckl and I said, Dave, you know, you're mostly known as a fusion drummer. Do you play straight ahead? And he says, yeah. So that's how he ended up on it. And that's how Carpenter ended up. And that was the story. You know, I told you all the other guys were interested in ADATs, and there you go.
Yeah, it's interesting that was the sort of connecting element. Well, you know, I like all the tracks on the album, but if I had to pick one favorite, I think it would probably be Go Away Moon.
Bill Cantos song. Bill's a great writer.
If I had to pick a favorite title, it would definitely be My Hot Girth. It's your anagram for I Got Rhythm, right?
Did you figure that out, or is it mentioned?
I'm a genius, man. I figure everything out. No, I'm sure I read it somewhere.
Bill's totally into anagrams. He gave everybody, when we were on the road in 94 and 96, he gives everybody names. He takes their letters and jumbles them up and comes up with a new name.